The threshing floor of the 4th production team is on the west of the river. Crossing the west of the river, there is no resident. However, Mr. Ghoul's home is located there. To call Mr. Ghoul's small hut home is obviously an overly grand statement. Mr. Ghoul has no home. He's alone. Speaking of which, Mr. Ghoul came to Wang Village in 1958. 18 years already. He was a young man when he first came. He was a rightist. What kind of technology means is the rightist? People in Wang Village have no idea. It was still the young Gu Hou, the later Mr. Gu, who explained it clearly by himself. Gu Hou stood in the cotton field, stretched out his palm, and patiently formed his 5 fingers into a fist, one by one. Land, reach, counter, bad, right. Then, very patiently pulling his fist back to a palm, one by one. Land, landlords. Rich, rich peasants. Counter, counter-revolutionary. Bad, bad elements. Right, it's me, rightist. Oh, Wang Village's people understood that he turned out to be a bad thing, but with tender skin. The deepest impression of the people in Wang Village on Gu Hou is of course not his tender skin, but his handwriting. Since Gu Hou came to Wang Village is full of characters, which is the slogan. In his spare time of active work, Gu Hou regularly went to the brigade headquarters, carrying a bucket of lime water, flipped through the People's Daily, picked out 7 or 8 sentences from the People's Daily, and brushed the walls when he saw them. In all honesty, farmers don't care much about national affairs. Farmers don't know what happened in Beijing. Actually, don't want to know. But since having Gu Hou is good, as soon as the country has a movement, the slogans on the walls reflect. Gu Hou made the distance between Wang Village and Beijing suddenly narrow. Don't say anything else, just say that this spring, counterattack the rightist style of overturning the verdict, which words were written by Gu Hou. Gu Hou wrote in Weibei, and the word counter was written particularly beautifully. The word counter has a characteristic. Basically, it is composed of 2 symbols, left cross and right cross. It is born with a murderous aura, and it is quietly worrying. Coupled with the thundering edges and corners of Weibei, it is like big knives, like sharp swords. It is the spirit of burning and killing all without leaving a piece of armor. Gu Hou's handwriting is really good. Why call Gu Hou Mr. Gu? There is a reason. In 1965, the 7th year after Gu Hou came to Wang Village, a female teacher from Wang Village Elementary School went home to give birth to a baby. After the application of Wang Village Elementary School and the approval of the branch secretary of Wang Village, it was decided that the female teacher's class should be substituted by Gu Hou. As soon as Gu Hou heard the news, he burst into tears. This is not a substitute, this is a reborn. First, the party is willing to put the dazzling task of teaching and educating people on the shoulders of Mr. Gu, which is a great responsibility from heaven. It can be seen that the party has not killed all intellectuals, but still loves them. Second, Mr. Gu's transformation was self-conscious, hard-working, and overcoming difficulties. And Gu Hou himself longed to obtain a standard for judgment, but he struggled to find it. Well, now Gu Hou stepped onto the podium, and the answer is there. It seems that the party is affirmative of Gu Hou's transformation. It is equivalent to issuing a certificate to Gu Hou. Mr. Gu couldn't fall asleep. The bright moonlight in front of my bed seemed to be frost on the floor. Raising my head, I looked at the bright moon and lowered my head amidst the party. Mr. Ghoul wiped away the tears from the corners of his eyes, and the burden on his shoulders became heavier. For many years, Mr. Ghoul has been working with his head down, with no distractions. He had no idea how much he loved education, and now he knew he's loyal to the education cause of the party. Persistent, obsessive, and crazy. As soon as he became a teacher, Mr. Ghoul had inexhaustible strength. He was more diligent than tunneling mud, digging soil, carrying manure, and plowing fields. He is insane, and his strength is endless. Mr. Ghoul usually does not speak and is a quiet gourd. As long as he could not speak, he would never say a sentence, never say a word. Now it's a different person, a different world. He's a donkey, pulling up his lips and running, never loose. His lips are now 2 milestones, which can grind anything. He can't wait to pick up a funnel, point it at the children's ears, and pour the ground things into the children's ears. Mr. Ghoul teaches a duplex class. The so-called duplex class is a class with several grades. Mr. Ghoul first used 15 minutes to teach first grade addition, and then 15 minutes to teach 5th grade Chinese. When it was over, he took another 15 minutes to do maneuvers to pull the topic out of the textbooks, generalize science, present dreams, talk about the future, and criticize and curse the United States and the Soviet Union. Mr. Ghoul also took the students out of the classroom and used the Pythagorean theorem to measure the height of the plane trees and neem trees with the help of the shadow of the sun. Due to Mr. Ghoul's unremitting efforts, every tree in Wang Village has obtained a scientific and accurate height. Of course, what Mr. Ghoul cares most about is the thoughts of the children. That's the top priority. He wants to instill Marxism in them. But since for socialist man the whole of what is called world history is nothing more than the creation of man through human labor and the development of nature for man, he therefore has palpable and incontrovertible proof of his self-mediated birth, of his process of emergence. Since the essentiality of man and nature, a man as the existence of nature for man and nature as the existence of man for man, has become practically and sensuously perceptible, the question of an alien being above nature and man, a question which implies an admission of the unreality of nature and of man, has become impossible in practice. Atheism, which is a denial of this unreality, no longer has any meaning, for atheism is a negation of God, through which negation it asserts the existence of man. But socialism as such no longer needs such mediation. Its starting point is the theoretically and practically sensuous consciousness of man and of nature as essential beings. It is the positive self-consciousness of man, no longer mediated through the abolition of religion, just as real life is positive reality, no longer mediated through the abolition of private property, through communism. Communism is the act of positing as the negation of the negation, and is therefore a real phase, necessary for the next period of historical development, in the emancipation and recovery of mankind. Communism is the necessary form and the dynamic principle of the immediate future, but communism is not as such the goal of human development, the form of human society. When it came to Marxism, Mr. Ghoul became a preacher. He was preaching, sentimentally tried his best, but the children didn't understand. Really didn't. If don't understand it, repeat it. 1 time doesn't work, then twice. Twice doesn't work, then 10 times. 10 times doesn't work, then 70 times. Truth is not afraid of repetition. Mr. Ghoul said to the snorted children, truth manifests itself through repetition and confirms its essence. Then, order in the classroom became an issue. Mr. Ghoul couldn't control it. He was sweaty, unable to control it. So Mr. Ghoul made a home visit and talked to the parents. I'm going to tell your dad. Mr. Ghoul said, I'm going to tell your mom. In front of the children, he cried in front of the parents. Mr. Ghoul's tears were thrilling and had a heart-pounding effect. The children thought he was pitiful, so were well-behaved, but the kids still didn't understand. Well, said Mr. Ghoul, you recite it first, store it in your brain first, and when you grow up, it will be your blood. It will heavily burn in your veins and become the torch and beacon. You will never get lost in your life. After a long, arduous effort, someone finally recited it. What puzzled Mr. Ghoul was that it was the children in the lower grades who were able to recite it, those in the first and second grades. This is anti-common sense and anti-logic. However, it is a fact. Mr. Ghoul organized these children into a small Marxist propaganda team. Mr. Ghoul took the children around the fields, roadsides, and the threshing floor. He couldn't wait. He wants his children to perform Marxism. The children's voices are small, mainly shy, and the voices are muffled when they recite too quickly. But it doesn't matter how vague. What matters is that children's voices are the most authentic Marxism. It's original from faraway Germany, from the rumbling October cannons and the blood of countless revolutionary martyrs. It makes the unreachable a scene in life, in the mouths of children, with the taste of chants and eulogies, and the nature of baptism and allegiance. Parents were shocked. They stood aside, squinting eyes with crow's feet in the corners, and opened their toothless mouths, fixed. That is the expression of joy and the ultimate achievement of the hope of kids becoming talents, ignorant but satisfied. Children are thriving in their eyes. That is Marxism. And even commune secretaries and county party secretaries may not be able to recite them. May not. And their children already recited well. This is iron reality. That surprised the wind and rain, wept ghosts and gods. The parents came to the school and said to the principal, no matter when the female teacher comes back, this rightist cannot leave. Mr. Ghoul's career as a mister was not long, ending in the winter of 1967. Why? Class clearing. Mr. Ghoul didn't know he actually had a fortune and spent more days in school. As early as 1966, Chairman Mao admonished the whole party and the people of all ethnic groups in the country very painfully. Never forget the class struggle. From the tone of Chairman Mao's speech, you should be able to tell that he was working hard. His Honor has already done his best, and sooner or later he will do it. Audible. Don't know if His Honor slept at the table. But the summer of 1967, Chairman Mao rolled up his sleeves. But why did Mr. Ghoul stay at Wang Village Elementary School until winter? That's why you don't understand Chairman Mao. Chairman Mao is not only a great leader for the Chinese people and the people of the world, but he is also a first-class peasant. In summer, when the crops are still green in the fields, Chairman Mao would never let farmers' hands rest. When the rice entered the barn and the cotton entered the warehouse, His Honor's heart was at ease. At this time, if running the revolution, he will catch them all. Mr. Ghoul was cleaned up. The so-called clean-up, to put it bluntly, is to be criticized. At least, This is the case in Wang Village. The Denunciation Meeting was held on the playground of Wang Village Elementary School. The atmosphere was quite good at the beginning, like a lively and successful banquet. Everyone had drunk alcohol. In the beginning, it was always modest and polite. As a matter of fact, everyone was actively preparing for the late attack. At the critical moment, took up the wine glass again and gave the final blow. When everyone is almost drunk, it's interesting now that everyone thinks that others are drunk and only oneself is sober, let alone half a caddy of wine. At this time, people love to be emotional. Good feelings and bad feelings come quickly. For a while, it was a kind of unrequited kindness. If a word was wrong, it became a hatred to the bones, swallowing mountains and rivers with the power of wine. The white knife goes in and the red knife goes out. It all came out of nowhere without a shadow. But wine makes falsehood real. It's true, to the point where it's tear-jerking and unstoppable. If you don't say it, you worry, and you'll be sorry for yourself for the rest of your life. Say it out loud, say it with rushing, say it all around. Say it with tears and call God. Say it by patting the table and hitting the bench. Chairman Mao once said, "Revolution is not a dinner party." This saying is not good. In the eyes of Wang Village people, revolution and drinking are actually similar. Same thing. The critique was going well. It's just that no one noticed Pei Quan. In fact, the little thing had come to the stage. Mr. Ghoul knelt on the ground with his head lowered, with a small blackboard on his chest and 2 rolling pins on his shoulders. When Pei Quan came, he walked calmly in front of Kong Suzhen, Wang Shiguo, Wang Daren, Yu Guoxiang, and Yang Guanglan, and finally stopped in front of Mr. Ghoul. Without saying anything, he took out the kitchen knife directly from his arms and slashed at Mr. Ghoul's head. The playground immediately fell silent. People watched as Mr. Ghoul's blood spurted out high like a single-color rainbow. Mr. Ghoul didn't fall down immediately. He raised his head, opened his eyes, and looked at Pei Quan with red eyes. He blinked and looked at him as if he had been dreaming just now and woke up at this moment. He didn't seem to know the pain at all. Mr. Ghoul's mouth moved, and it seemed that he wanted to tell Pei Quan something, but he didn't say anything and fell down. It was not until this time that people remembered to hold Pei Quan down. But the little thing is a loach. How can he be held? Pei Quan screamed while struggling. "I can't recite it. I don't recite it. I just can't recite it. I just don't recite it." Mr. Ghoul did not die, but he refused to go back to school firmly, and then herded the dogs. Although he is no longer a teacher, there is one thing. Mr. Ghoul's requirements for himself have not changed at all, and they are still as strict as ever. It's not an exaggeration to say harsh. To give a simple example, of course, herding ducks is certainly associated with dog eggs. Maybe no one believes that Mr. Ghoul has never eaten a single duck egg from the group. Never. Is Mr. Ghoul greedy? Yes, but whenever Mr. Ghoul was greedy, he would hold up a duck egg and remind himself to the sun. This is not an ordinary duck egg. It is collective. It is an oval form of public ownership, and it reflects that it is the great and open spirit of public ownership. Once eaten, its nature changes, becoming a private, shameful, personal property, a rotten sensory enjoyment. So he can't eat. Greed is the enemy, and so is the body. Reconstruction is an unremitting struggle against the enemy, that is, oneself. About duck eggs, something unfortunate still happened. Not long after Mr. Ghoul herds the ducks, a person suddenly appears in front of Mr. Ghoul. Jiang Haohua, a female, a widow. Speaking of Jiang Haohua and Mr. Ghoul, things are really unusual and romantic. Look at the beginning. That day, Mr. Ghoul was herding ducks on the small sampan when a person suddenly appeared on the other side of the river, holding a water-red square in her hand and shaking it at Mr. Ghoul. The beginning of the story is preposterous. Mr. Ghoul knew that someone was going to cross the river. It was very common for a duck herder to take a ferry for passers-by. Mr. Ghoul rolled the small sampan over and saw clearly that it was Jiang Haohua. Mr. Ghoul and Jiang Haohua are not familiar with each other and have never talked. But after all, she was from Wang village, so he knew her anyway. Then help her. The entire ferry process was uneventful. The small sampan was pulled aside, and Jiang Haohua stood up straight and planned to go ashore. The dramatic scene appeared at this time. Jiang Haohua suddenly raised her fist and hit Mr. Ghoul's back. The sound of dong was quite heavy, like revenge. Mr. Ghoul was taken aback and turned his head. Jiang Haohua's arm was still raised there, smiling. Her fist clenched tightly, her lower lip also biting tightly, making a bluff threat. But she didn't hit again. This move is special, stylish, and chic. It's the kind of hurried, at the same time melodious tone. Mr. Ghoul has never experienced it. Before Mr. Ghoul could understand it carefully, Jiang Haohua jumped and went ashore. Gone. The small sampan swayed left and right, and Mr. Ghoul was also swaying left and right. Spring is naughty on the red apricot branch. Wang Guowei is right. The word naughty is full of artistic conception. The most interesting thing is that there is not a sentence or a word from beginning to end. Wang Guowei said it well. Without a word, it is all romantic. Mr. Ghoul was naughty, quite naughty. In the days that followed, there was no trace of Jiang Haohua. This is naughtier. Mr. Ghoul has at least 900 ducks in his heart. After being naughty for several days, Mr. Ghoul also looked at his shadow on the water, smiled wryly, and stopped being naughty. 5 days later, Jiang Haohua appeared in a more charming way, almost the way that the little fox fairy in rural legends. The legend goes like this, saying that a bachelor who could not get a wife saved a fairy red little fox fairy from a hunter. When he got home, he found that the fairy red little fox fairy had already stayed in the kitchen of his house. After a roll, the rice was there, and after another roll, the spinach and tofu soup was there too. From then on, the bachelor and his fairy red little fox fairy lived a happy life together, and the happy life lasted for thousands and thousands of years. 5 days later, Mr. Ghoul didn't expect that he would also encounter such a fairy red little fox fairy. As soon as he entered the small hut, Mr. Ghoul opened the lid of the pot and accidentally discovered an amazing secret. The rice was already cooked. The scalding rice made a slight sound when the lid was opened, like an affectionate sigh. And the spinach tofu soup is also ready-made. Mr. Ghoul put down the lid of the pot and looked around, even in the kitchen, but no one was there. No matter how confused Mr. Ghoul is, he can also guess the mystery here. Mr. Ghoul was moved. The point was that Jiang Haohua was not an ordinary woman, but a widow. This is even more unusual, bringing with it the warmth and desolation of a fallen person from the end of the world. Mr. Ghoul is no longer naughty, and he is filled with down-to-earth happiness and sadness. The food was swallowed, but the tears flowed out. That night, Mr. Ghoul took a bath with soap and quietly waited for Jiang Haohua's arrival. It's really a wave of unrest, Another wave of rises. Jiang Haohua, she didn't come. 8 days later, Mr. Ghoul was already disheartened and turned around, but Jiang Haohua appeared on the stage with a bang. She touched along to Mr. Ghoul's small hut late at night. I am emaciated for you, and I am looking for you fruitlessly in iron shoes, but you are in the dim light. Mr. Ghoul lit the lamp and noticed that Jiang Haohua's hair was combed, and the whole body was full of traces of vigorous cleaning and careful grooming. As a result, she has a fearless and persevering temperament, which is easily reminiscent of those positive, underground, indomitable heroines in the movie. Jiang Haohua glanced at Mr. Ghoul. She's a neat person, after all. She took a step up, and with a ha, the light went out. The color of the night suddenly expanded. Nerd, be honest. Do you want to? Yes. Want what? You. What do you want from me? Mr. Ghoul dared not speak. Looks like you don't want to. I do. Want what? I want your body. What do you want it to do? Mr. Ghoul dared not to speak again. What do you want her to do? Sleep. Do you really want to? Really? Dare? Dare. For real or not? For real. Jiang Haohua stopped talking, stood in front of Mr. Ghoul, and waited quietly. After waiting for a long time, Mr. Ghoul still did not move. Jiang Haohua said, Mr. Ghoul, I think you are really a dark nerd, and you have a hard mouth. The words have already been said for this sake, and it's a matter of course. Mr. Ghoul hugged Jiang Haohua in the dark. As soon as he hugged, Mr. Ghoul made an astonishing discovery. Jiang Haohua was naked and smooth, and her 2 eggplants were hanging there symmetrically. One was higher than a mountain of knives, and the other was hotter than a sea of fire. Although Jiang Haohua doesn't look very good, a pair of breasts have infinitely beautiful scenery and incredible shocking power. Mr. Ghoul's fingers pinched Jiang Haohua's nipples. Just when he mustered up his courage, he was timid, and his fingers kept shaking. Jiang Haohua said, Mr. Ghoul, are you sending a telegram? Mr. Ghoul was amused by Jiang Haohua's words and immediately relaxed. Don't look at this woman's lack of culture, but she knows humor, which shows that she has a bright mind. Mr. Ghoul picked up Jiang Haohua and laid her flat on the bed. He was anxious and wished that his wish could be fulfilled immediately. However, Jiang Haohua tightened her thighs and didn't cooperate. Now Mr. Ghoul didn't know what to do. There is no logic here, and there is also no science and thinking. Mr. Ghoul didn't know what to do. Jiang Haohua already knew. Although this nerd is knowledgeable, he's a layman on the bed and can be said an idiot. Jiang Haohua had to open her thighs again. Mr. Ghoul got on, but Jiang Haohua immediately clamped again. Jiang Haohua said, Mr. Ghoul, you promised me one thing first. This was that Mr. Ghoul expected. He knew what Jiang Haohua wanted to say. Mr. Ghoul's crotch was hard, but his heart was already soft. Like reciting the text, he said, I promise you all, I have done the investigation. You are a poor farmer of the 3rd generation, illiterate, and your man died 5 years ago. I don't despise that you are a widow. I will be good to your 7-year-old son, and so is your 5-year-old daughter. I'll marry you. I promise to marry you. Jiang Haohua lay down but put a hand on Mr. Ghoul's shoulder. Jiang Haohua said, I don't want you to marry me. That's fine. What do you want? I want duck eggs. Mr. Ghoul said, What did you say? Jiang Haohua said, Give me duck eggs. Mr. Ghoul heard clearly. He did not talk, has not spoken. Mr. Ghoul suddenly slapped the bedboard, and his righteousness was awe-inspiring. Mr. Ghoul said, I'd rather not fuck. This is something Jiang Haohua never expected. Who would have thought? The atmosphere in the dark was awkward, kind of unstoppable. Jiang Haohua was somewhat ashamed. Slowly, she raised her butt and pushed it up, again and again, on the top, and every time it hits Mr. Gu's most deadly place. Mr. Gu has never tasted such a taste before. His brows are lifted, his pores are erected, and his mouth is sighing. He wanted to get out of bed, but couldn't let it go. With Jiang Haohua's bumps, Mr. Gu's eyes straightened a little bit, and finally his mouth opened wide. It was too late to say the fastness. He couldn't hold it anymore and shot out in a flash. Reaching out to touch, Jiang Haohua's stomach was covered with a hot big pile. Mr. Gu was fooled. Something big happened. Mr. Gu was extremely regretful. Said no, said no, said no. Ejaculation is also deflated. Mr. Gu no longer had the arrogance he had just now and was in a trance. He cautiously stammered to Jiang Haohua, "You know, are you pregnant?" This sentence was irritating. It's funny. It's fun. What a nerd. Stupidity. When Jiang Haohua was unbearable, she was angry and annoyed, said angrily, "I don't know. How can you ask me about what you did?" Hearing that, Mr. Gu was unconfident and full of sweat. It was as if he didn't shoot the semen out, but on the contrary, the semen threw him out with crazy recoil, flying out like a cannonball. Mr. Gu slumped on the bed. Jiang Haohua didn't wipe, got up from the bed, lit a light, and went straight to the duck eggs. Mr. Gu found that Jiang Haohua was not taking them, but pulling them out. It's the impression of uprooting. Mr. Gu sat on the bed, feeling extremely sad, and immediately concluded two things. First, the heart should be hard, not soft. Second, the dick should be soft, not hard. These are two basic experiences that should never be forgotten. Mr. Gu paid a 9-month mental burden for his external ejaculation. In the first 5 months of these 9 months, Jiang Haohua came to pick up duck eggs every 3 to 5 days. Fortunately, not many, 4 or 5 each time. Mr. Gu did not stop her. He dared not. He was as fearful and humble as an earthworm in front of this woman who could not even write her own name. Shameful, shameful, miserable, miserable. He promised, surrendered, and betrayed. He is a traitor. Not only did he bog down in his personal life, but he also betrayed the collective, trust, and public ownership. Shameful, shameful. 5 months later, Jiang Haohua stopped coming. However, the loss is heavy and the cost is huge. A total of 146 duck eggs. That is to say, Mr. Gu surrendered 146 times, betrayed 146 times, and fell 147 times. There is more to die for. There is more to die for. Mr. Gu had thought about death, but for Mr. Gu, death at this time was shameful. If he dies now, who will redeem it? To whom will the work of cleansing the soul be given? He is falling. This fall is sober and therefore a double fall. If you use death to escape this sober depravity, it is triple depravity. There is only one way to wash, and that is to read. Read Marx, Engels, Lenin, Stalin, and Mao. It is not enough to read, to recite. Dunfang and Sanya had just started and slept, but it was only 2 days in total. 2 days later, Sanya disappeared, like a grasshopper in the autumn. Sanya completely disappeared from the land of Wang village. Even if you turn into a spider and crawl on the ground, you can't find her. Do I like Sanya? Duanfang asked himself this way, but Duanfang didn't know. Duanfang didn't want to get too worried about this issue, but Duanfang's body wanted her. He wants to sleep with her. He thinks this is like. However, he could not sleep with her. This is annoying. Duanfang is like a headless fly, flying everywhere, but he can no longer find the egg with a crack. Duanfang just wanted to find someone to chat with and have a good chat with. Wandering around aimlessly, Duanfang came to the east of the river. He came to the front of the small hut. Mr. Ghoul has not come back yet. Fortunately, the lock on Mr. Ghoul's small hut was broken. It was just a fake, and Duanfang pulled it off, then sat down and wait slowly. The hut was quite short and had no windows, so it was very dark and sultry. But it was extraordinarily neat. Everything has its fixed place, both the traces of wrapping up the last course and the signs of waiting and preparing for the next course. What surprised Duanfang was the duck eggs, which were piled up neatly by Mr. Ghoul, with the big head down and the small head up, horizontal and vertical, as if the honor guard of our People's Liberation Army in the photo had a solemn and serious atmosphere. Just from such a small detail, it can be seen how deeply Mr. Ghoul has feelings for the collective duck eggs. Of course, the most conspicuous are the books of Mr. Ghoul, all of which were written by revolutionary leaders. Duanfang picked it up, turned a few pages, and put it down again. Mr. Ghoul never thought that Duanfang would wait for him at home. There is a guest at home. Although they are both in Wang village, to Mr. Ghoul he is almost like a visitor from heaven, who came here after a difficult journey through thousands of mountains and rivers. Mr. Ghoul was very happy, but at the same time he had some doubt. All right, why did Duanfang come to me? The logic lacks the minimum basis. What is he doing here? Mr. Ghoul was careful. Of course, happiness should be the main thing, so Mr. Ghoul smiled. However, Mr. Ghoul's smile was a bit special. It came and went quickly, and it came and went in a hurry, showing signs of stupidity, barbarism, and uncontrollability. Thinking about it, he had been lonely for too long, and his mood and expression didn't match up for well. Mr. Ghoul just smiled with jokes like this, but his heart was clear and he didn't say anything. Duanfang suddenly felt that he was really reckless today and like going to a random doctor in a hurry. How did he come to find Mr. Ghoul? Mr. Ghoul was happy, but he didn't speak. Even if he spoke, it was only a few words, not even a sentence. Duanfang was all thinking about Sanya, so he wanted to chat with Mr. Ghoul about Sanya. But how to start? Difficult. He didn't speak, and he didn't say anything. The two just sat there, holding back. After holding it for a long time, Duanfang suddenly said, "Mr. Ghoul, have you ever been in love?" Mr. Ghoul was stunned and had the vigilance of the sudden change. He stared at Duanfang with the kind of alertness in his eyes that didn't match his expression. He began to worry that Duanfang was sent by Jiang Haohua. For a long time, Mr. Ghoul murmured, 146. Way off the point. What 146? Mr. Ghoul was silent again. This time it was extraordinarily long. In the end, Mr. Ghoul stood up, raised his head, raised his eyebrows, and said,
Externality here is not to be understood as the world of sense which manifests itself and is accessible to the light, to the man endowed with senses. It is to be taken here in the sense of alienation, of a mistake, a defect, which ought not to be. For what is true is still the idea. Nature is only the form of the idea's other being. And since abstract thought is the essence, that which is external to it is by its essence something merely external. The abstract thinker recognizes at the same time that sensuousness, externality in contrast to thought shuttling back and forth within itself, is the essence of nature. But he expresses this contrast in such a way as to make this externality of nature, its contrast to thought, its defect, so that inasmuch as it is distinguished from abstraction, nature is something defective. An entity which is defective not merely for me or in my eyes but in itself, intrinsically, has something outside itself which it lacks. That is, its essence is different from it itself. Nature has therefore to supersede itself for the abstract thinker, for it is already posited by him as a potentially superseded being. For us, mind has nature for its premise, being nature's truth and for that reason its absolute prius. In this truth nature has vanished, and mind has resulted as the idea arrived at being for itself, the object of which, as well as the subject, is the concept. This identity is absolute negativity, for whereas in nature the concept has its perfect external objectivity, this its alienation has been superseded, and in this alienation the concept has become identical with itself. But it is this identity therefore, only in being a return out of nature.
Duanfang was confused by Mr. Gu's words. Duanfang asked softly, "Mr. Gu, what are you talking about?" Mr. Gu turned around, took out a book from the shelf, and handed it to Duanfang's hand. It's Marx's work, Economics, Philosophy, Manuscripts, 1963, Beijing, People's Publishing House, price 0.42 yuan. The cover features a profile of Marx. His curly hair, his bushy beard, his tight frown, his worried look, his bulky top, his clear forehead. Mr. Gu said, 164. I'm talking about the 164th page of this book. The recitation of this large paragraph saved Mr. Gu. Before Duanfang had time to speak, Mr. Gu suddenly became active, and his enthusiasm fell from the sky like the water of the Yellow River falling from the sky. Since the water of the Yellow River comes from the sky, it must flow to the sea and never return. Mr. Gu's articulation was clear. He is not interested in love. He is not interested in women. He is interested in people, states, societies, political parties, and classes, and perhaps the military. His talk suddenly took on the color of a political report, with the seriousness and urgency of popularization and improvement. Duanfang couldn't understand why Mr. Gu had such a good memory. His conversations were always accompanied by such interjections. Marx said, Plekhanov said, Luxemburg said, Stalin said, Chairman Mao said, even Ho Chi Minh said, Kim Il-sung said. This is the citation. Because of the large number of citations, Duanfang believed that although Mr. Gu was talking, he actually said nothing. He was just reciting. But the leader's voice was captivating, full of stamina, full of explosiveness, the smell of gunpowder smoke, the intense fire of TNT. Mr. Gu was very enthusiastic. Mr. Gu also specifically mentioned the future. Mr. Gu said, Marx said, we will not get selfish and pitiful happiness, we will get the whole world. Mr. Gu's passionate speech lasted about 45 minutes. After 45 minutes, he stopped and sat down. The expression on his face was still indifferent, smiling, intoxicated. The corners of his mouth are chewing and tasting. Mr. Gu finally said, I want to thank the party for sending me to Wang Village. I believe that if I stay in Wang Village for another 10 years, I will become a 100 non-party Bolshevik. After Duanfang left, Mr. Gu did not fall asleep immediately. He had to do a job. Although Mr. Ghoul hardly speaks usually, Mr. Ghoul has developed a good habit. No matter who he has communicated with or what he has said to anyone, he will recall and reveal it afterward. Think about that if there's anything wrong with that sentence. His memory is amazing. As long as he said it, even if it was a sneeze, he could recall it. In the words of Marx, perhaps Hegel, this is called self-consideration. In the words of Han Yu, it is called 3 self-examinations. And in the words of Confucius, it is called self-contemplation. As for Mr. Ghoul, he gave his secret behavior a rather militarized name, called demoning the mind. Mr. Ghoul's demoning is careful and strict, like a soldier on command. It fully conforms to the attitude of a transformed person. Mr. Ghoul reviewed his and Duanfang's words again and was relieved. There was no problem, not a single landmine. Mr. Ghoul fell asleep, and this 100% non-party Bolshevik 10 years later fell asleep with great mindfulness.